Afghanistan. It's the only country in the entire world where girls are not allowed to go to school.
سقوط افغانستان هیچگاه فکرم نکرد.
Afghanistan is not made for women, whether actresses or not.
It gets a little scary when I'm out in public.
Over there, you can't even trust the guards.
Every time I give an interview, every time it causes controversy. Everybody wants me to quit, death threats.
I slept with a gun under my pillow.
They've given an official letter saying if she ever returns, we're going to handcuff her from the plane. This was the moment that changed my life.
Our struggles, our pain can help someone else as well.
As women, we're all resilient. But why do we Afghan women always have to live between the victim and the victor?
روزه یک امید هست همه چیز خوب شد در افغانستان.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks YouTube channel / podcast, where I, your host, film culture critic and journalist Carolyn Hines, speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Brishkay Ahmed to talk about her film, her documentary, In the Room, Their Voice, Our Fight. And it's a very interesting documentary. It's a documentary about women in Afghanistan and how the war in Afghanistan, and then the eventual, I will call it straight up, the betrayal of the US government of the Afghanistan people, but particularly the Afghanistan women, and how that has had an emotional, political, and I would say also mental effect on these women in Afghanistan, but also those who have immigrated. And it features the work and the voices of Nelofer Pazira-Fisk, Vida Samadzai, Sahar Parniyan, Mozhdah Jamalzada. Did I say that right?
Yeah, well, it's a hard name, Mozhdah Jamalzada. It's a hard name.
Mozhdah Jamalzada, Shogofa Sediqi, and you, Brishkay. And I the reason I mentioned all of the ladies' name at the beginning, because I really wanted to make sure that I paid homage to them, I should respect them, because what they're doing in this film is very brave, because we know like the voices of women right now are literally politically silenced in Afghanistan. You know, like the Taliban, they since they took over of Afghanistan in 2021, they started passing more and more laws that kind of shrunk the presence of women in public sphere in Taliban. You know, they made it, women had to completely wear the burqa again. Then they could only go into certain spaces. And then they had to, if they could go into certain spaces, they had to go with like male relatives. And then if they're in public, now they can't speak in public, right? So I thought it was important to me that I acknowledge them straight up, because this film is, as you said, it's about their voices. And this film is I want to talk something specifically about this film that I thought is interesting, because the way the film begins is it's a documentary, but I think it's also almost like an interpretive performance in a way of what being an Afghanistan woman in Afghanistan, as well as in Canada, I would say North America, is like. Because like you are in the film, you are a subject within this film, but you move through this film in the physical space of the film as someone trying to contend with what it means to be an Afghani woman. So I want to talk about that aspect of the film first, because I kind of said, in my head, it was like, it's a documentary, but it's also almost a kind of dramatic interpretation, and it's an experimental film, and it's also a piece of performance art. So talk to me about just like finding a way to get all of the things you're thinking about in your head into the film and kind of make it this way.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks, Caroline, for having me on here and for including our film, because it's really important if we have women outside of our Afghan community that amplify our fight and our voices. And I do feel like the biggest change comes when we unite together, just from across the globe, as female identifying individuals. So just that, thanks a lot. But yeah, your question about the form of it, I think you nailed it very correctly. It is a documentary, but it is very much, it takes a more of a dramatic, cinematic, experimental, and more introspective I would say sort of perspective, you know, because it's very much about my feelings and my thoughts and things like that. And I think the reason why I did it is simply because I think to date we mostly have seen Afghan women's stories sort of in the breaking news kind of world, and through the breaking news kind of form, right? Shaky cameras, like war and violence, and I wanted to sort of situate the film in beauty. That was important. And I wanted to also show the world that each of my Afghan women in the film are really different and nuanced. They walk and talk and live in a different environment, and they take up space differently. Because many times we're just sort of seen as Afghan women either as the women under the blue burqa or the liberated Western hero that likes to play soccer or become like a guitar or a rap artist. So, we've only been framed in two ways. And I kind of really wanted to break that. So that's why I wanted to give the film a look that celebrated our diversity as Afghan women, but also wanted to step away from the frame of the breaking news voice and tone, because I'm very tired of it. And I would like one day for our women not to be breaking news.
No, I agree completely, because the thing about Western media, when it comes to depicting women of ethnic identities, whether it's women from MENA or SWANA communities, from the Caribbean, from South and Latin America, from Africa, Asia, when it comes to depicting us, like American media, this is both in Hollywood, but as well as the news media, has I wouldn't even say a tendency, it is like almost like their mandate to depict us either as foreign concepts, abstract concepts where we're exotified, and what we're strange creatures that they're looking at in a zoo, or we have to be fully assimilated into white Western identity. And it has to be specifically white Western identity, because they don't even look at how people of color within those from these same communities who are like second, third, fourth generation immigrants of these countries are assimilated, but they're still other, because we know they're still objectified, they're still discriminated against, they still face racism. Up to today, we see what ICE is doing in America, kidnapping and detaining and deporting people of ethnic identities, whether they're a citizen or not, right? And when it comes to, and then with regards to Afghanistan in particular, so the first war was happening in 2001, and this was after when the US invaded Afghanistan under the guise of liberating under the guise of liberating Afghani women, particularly Afghanistan women, as this kind of beacon and this icon of their justification for invading the country. The media was all about portraying Afghani women as being needed to be saved. They were damsels in distress who needed their burqa stripped away and to be fully, for them to be seen as worthy of being saved. They had to use the whole idea of Western white feminism. Like, these women, we're gonna remove the veil, and in order to do this, we have to look at them as with regards to white Western lens. We're like, oh, they don't get to wear bikinis to the beach, which they did before the Taliban, like in the 70s and the 60s, like women in the Middle East were dressing just as metropolitan as women in Europe and America were, and then it was like, oh, we need to get them to get full feminist rights, but it's full feminist rights with regards to what white women thought about feminism. So I want to start us talking about the film there, because two of your subjects, two of your guests, Nelofer and I think also Vida, kind of touch that. This is where their segments lean into, because Nelofer is an actress, she's a filmmaker in her own right, and so she talked about this film that she made called Kandahar, which showed at Cannes in 2001, where she was looked at as like saying, oh, this is a woman from Afghanistan. Look, she's here at Cannes. They're like, we need to save her. And that's the lens that they looked at her as, even though she's an actress there with a film. They're not looking at her as an actress. They're looking at her as an icon and as a figure to be saved from Afghanistan. And then there's Vida, who was a beauty pageant queen who attended the Miss Earth. I will admit, I never heard of that pageant until this film, the Miss Earth pageant. And that was how she was also looked at too, that she wore a bikini and it was a big deal. So I want us to talk about how these two women kind of represent that ideal of feminism where they were saying, but we were already always like this.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And then they have to contend with the fact that the West is looking at them as something to be saved, not for being women, but women that need to be westernized and assimilated. I want you to talk about them and this part in the film.
Yeah. So they both had a different sort of experience coming out of it and a different perspective, which I think is valid and important, right? So Nelofer is at Cannes, but as much as people in Cannes are trying to like make her into like offering her fashion designer clothes and, you know, like she's literally being offered L'Oreal makeup campaign things, she's rejecting all of that. And she's trying to educate them by saying like, I'm not here to like be like, basically, I guess her intent was, I'm not here to be your pawn on your chessboard, right? I am here for women's rights and I'm here to talk about Afghan women and the oppression. So because of her background in journalism and her being a refugee and coming to Canada and sort of rebuilding her life again, she had a very clear perspective of who she was and who she wanted to be. So she was not easily sort of played with.
Yeah.
You know, too bad. Or the media, they got a little bit of a surprise when they met her because she suddenly played them, right? And then, you know, later on, she tells us in the film, sadly, although she was able to, you know, speak up for Afghan women and change the focus, instead of it being about her, she really made it about my sisters back in the country. When she held the US accountable, when she asked the tough questions, like, yes, you want to go back and yes, you want to go into Afghanistan, but you cannot, you know, bomb women out of their burqas, as she said. Yes, when she asked the US to be held accountable for why the Afghan women are in the place that they are, which is the US's funding of Mujahideen warlords back in the late 70s against the Soviets, which made women, you know, which gave power to fundamentalists who were already oppressing women, but in a smaller number. And then they got trillions of dollars and tons of weapons and expanded. So when she asked these tough questions, as she mentions in the film, oh no, then she was not valuable anymore, right? They kind of pushed her aside. And that was her betrayal. With Vida, it was a little different in the sense that she celebrated the American identity of like women being these commodified entities, right? That we can use to sell things, right? I mean, that's what a beauty queen pageant, like a beauty contestant is, right? They're just going to sell you things, right? And she enjoyed that, and all of that is good. But what's surprising is in the film, she verifies a very simple fact, which is it was 1992 in Afghanistan when she participated in a Miss Afghanistan pageant. So the idea of this, her being able to participate in the Miss Earth pageant, it wasn't like a gift opportunity that was given by the West to her. She was already ahead of the game. She was at 17 in 1992, which is not that far back, was in an Afghanistan's Miss Afghanistan pageant representing a country. She was not wearing a bikini because that's never been like part of the, you know, society's representation. She's wearing a white dress in doing that. But I thought it was fascinating how she revealed this fact that this walking down the runway and showing herself and celebrating herself is something as a right she had, but it was taken away. You know, so those kinds of things were fascinating to discover.
Yeah, it was a right she had, and it was a right that was taken away not only by the Taliban, but also the US government, because again, they were helping to fund these same Taliban warlords, you know, and like we felt like there's been so many reports and exposés done about how the US has funded the Taliban, but also ISIS and all of these other terrorists, the same organizations that they list as terrorists, they're funded, you know, and that's been a part of the US imperialism game and from decades ago. They did it in Cuba, you know, they did it in South America, they're doing it in America, Venezuela right now.
And the funny thing is that most people are not aware of a simple, like very important fact is that, you know, we recall a place called Guantanamo and people being held there in Guantanamo. And it was understood that the people inside Guantanamo supposedly were like the biggest terrorists, right? Like that the world had to fear. But 6 of those people in Guantanamo were the exact people that were flown out and brought inside Afghanistan and given full leadership control as the head of the Taliban.
Yeah.
So isn't that fascinating? Right?
They did it in South Korea.
And if you also look at present day Syria, the president of Syria was also somebody that, you know, a decade or two ago had a bounty on his head for being participating in activities with ISIS against women and girls. So I've always known one fact: America has never been a friend of women and girls. And I'll tell you why. Because from the 1940s and 50s on, they're trying to control your body, they're trying to control your mind, and they're trying to make you feel really shitty about yourself every day possible. Because one, they can make money out of you that way. And two, if you're so busy living the dream of this like celebrated Western women, you're too hungry to fight back, first of all, because you're always dieting. And you don't have any like money or the idea of unity, because you're always put in competition with other women, because other women are always seen as your threat and as your competition, either by like face or job opportunity or that, or they're trying to like make you become the perfect mother and the perfect working woman at the same time. So you're so bloody exhausted by the end of the day, and there's no way you could possibly fight back against the patriarchal bullshit that they offer.
No, and it's true. That's why I love what Nelofer says, where she's like, you can't bob women out of their burqas. Women need education, they need opportunities. And it's so true, because it's like, again, like talking about the US media, like so much of the coverage at that time, from I would say 2001 up until 2006, when they kind of started to lose interest, a lot of it was about women and wearing burqas. Women are wearing burqas. Women are wearing burqas. And they were like, we need to save these women from wearing burqas, and we need to get these women to, and we need to save these women, and a lot of it has to do with their physical presentation. We want these women to dress like us for us to be able to think of saving them. But the other thing is, like what she says, like women don't really, it's not only about the burqas. The burqas is just one small aspect of it. We need opportunities. We need jobs. We need education. And they were getting that, and it was taken away. And then the US government, like, they came in and they were occupying. They were an occupying force, you know? And then it's like, you say you're here to help the women, but where are you helping to destroy our schools, our school system? Why are you taking funding away that is supposed to go towards furthering our healthcare system, you know, furthering our education system? The money that belongs to Afghanistan, to the Afghani people, you know? And it's like, and the thing is like, the US imperial machine isn't interested in helping countries succeed and become self-sufficient. It's not about helping the people of these countries succeed and becoming self-sufficient. It's not about helping the women of these countries succeed and become self-sufficient, because the whole game is about occupation and oppression. You know, if you free women, you free a country. You know, and this is something that has been known from the beginning of time. And then if you want to take it more recent, like the civil rights movement, so much of the civil rights movement depended on women, because it was women that were like leading so much of the civil rights movement in both the Black Panther Party and without. And again, right now in Palestine, so many women talking about protests for Palestine. So many protests for Palestine were being led by women, you know, and like, and there's this old Chinese proverb that says women hold up half the sky, you know, and that comes from that women are there to lift society up. If you uplift women, women can lift the society up. So this film, I find, is very much about that. It's about how women, you take women like Nelofer away, if you take women like Mozhdah away, if you take women like Vida away, Sahar away, women like you away from Afghanistan society, society is gonna fall, because you don't have the women that are there to help lift up the society, and you don't have women that are there to help children to help uplift the society, and you don't have women that are there to help their men uplift the society. Because the thing is that sometimes I think a lot of us, we forget that patriarchy doesn't only harm women, it harms men. You know, because it is harming these men, you know, because not every man believes in these systems, but they're like, they're harmed by it as well.
Yeah. You know, I've always thought about this question of like, why are they doing this to our women? Why are they doing this? You know, and I almost feel like Afghanistan was some sort of a strange experiment, like back in, you know, in the first 1996 when they brought the Taliban. But I think there was a trial and a testing to see if we cut out half the population out of the fight, right? We would only, if we want to go back, if we want to go in and occupy, we're only dealing with half, because the other half are the half that we're negotiating with, which are the men, are already keeping the other half in control for us, because we've sold them these ideas that it's religion and it's that, right? So it's like they have found Afghan men to be their oddly agreeable soldiers, because when Afghan men are telling their wives and daughters and nieces and stuff to stay home and punishing them when they want to, get work or ask tough questions. So in many ways, great, right? Like the Western forces have their like a soldiers already in there. And then I was wondering, why this question of like no education? What has that got to do with it, right? And I think I found my answer in the fact that the boys get to go to school, right? So if the boys come back home and their mothers or sisters or aunts have an education and they ask a question like, what does this mean? Does this make sense? Is this right? A woman who has an education, who has critical thinking opportunity, could then educate and influence the boy, right? So there's even thinking that is so sadistic, that is on that level, which is inside the home. How do we keep control of information so that it's not twisted and benefits the nation, the home nation, but still continues to benefit us? And then the last, which is incredibly sinister, is when women are in that position, and there are women who don't have husbands, there are women who don't have fathers, there are women who don't have brothers, they don't have guardians even to like go out and about. And if you don't have education, for instance, what jobs could you get? I mean, you're either going to have to prostitute yourself for income, right? Or you're going to have to forcefully become the wife or mother of a man to be able to have a livelihood, or you resort to becoming a maid and cleaning someone's house. That is it. That is the only opportunity. So it's incredibly sad as a woman, imagine waking up as a young girl and knowing those are my three options for survival.
Yeah.
I always think about those women because when I was in Afghanistan and I was working there, I met lots of women who did not have males in their family because so many men in Afghanistan sadly have also passed due to war, landmines, lots of challenges. There are tons of families where it literally is just all sisters, women living together. And the way they have to navigate that feels like a real, like a hard Handmaid's Tale kind of a, story. And I just want to say one final thing so that you and your audience are aware of what's happening in 2025. A shift happened, which I think somehow, the forces that are supporting the Taliban, which absolutely is the United States and other NATO nations as well, but predominantly the United States, saw an incredible sort of coming together of women from outside of Afghanistan for women inside Afghanistan. There was this networks that were happening underground and things. And then they found a very clever way to bring distance into that as well, right? And one of the ways they've done now in 2025 is they've opened up tourism so that Western women and East Asian women who have money can go and visit Afghanistan as tourists, see all those beautiful land sites, see the nation, and the Taliban do not bother them. They let them walk around as long as they dress modestly. They don't need even a male guardianship. So basically what's happening in Afghanistan now is you're seeing women across the street and under the burqa who's starving, who is desperately trying to find food for her kids, watching a Western or East Asian woman or South Asian woman from a rich country, walking past them, taking snapshots. And so now what's happening is that the women become enemies to each other, right? Because they look at them and they're like, you're not my sister. Right? You're here parading around and using this opportunity to exploit my nation. You see me, right? But because you want the privilege of being, traveling to this cool country. And I find that so sad and infuriating. So if anybody is watching here as women and also men or listening to your podcast or video podcast, please don't go and become a tourist in Afghanistan. Don't do that.
I'm so glad you said that because that is something that I have been noticing. And in like the marketing media, because I do pay attention to how like marketing is done for tourism in different countries.
Yeah.
So it's happening in Afghanistan and it's happening in Dubai. And I noticed it, and the same exact thing when you mentioned East Asian women in particular, I was like, yes, because I've noticed that too. There's so many advertisements being targeted to East Asian, particularly women from Korea, and from China, to go to Dubai. And these women are encouraged, and of course they're with their partners too. But when you watch the commercials, you see that these women, like, they present these tourists in these countries dressing in a Western way. And when I say Western, where arms out, shorts, loose fitting clothing. Again, nothing wrong with that. But it's also like, where's the cultural respect? And when I say cultural respect, is we know that it is cultural respect to wear long sleeve clothing. Women, when you go to certain spaces, you wear a head covering, a scarf, a hijab, or scarf, whatever.
Modesty and respect.
Modesty. And it's like, isn't this why? How come you're not encouraging the tourists to dress the same way that you expect the local women to dress?
Yeah.
And it is so insidious to me. Because and the reason it is so insidious to me, because as you were saying, it does encourage the local women to feel distance from these female tourists from other countries. Because you're saying, if you're here to see the country, why aren't you seeing me, this woman, the way I am? Why aren't you relating to me this way? How are you just walking past me and seeing me as either a prop for you to take pictures with or as something invisible to walk past? And it's happening with Afghanistan. I've noticed it's happening with Dubai. And I mentioned Dubai specifically because what is happening in Dubai is so especially insidious because like Dubai is a country built on slavery and maintained by slavery.
Oh God, yeah.
And then there's also
on the exploitation and oppression of Sudanese people.
And Sudanese people, the UAE is funding the genocide in Sudan. And for anyone who thinks I've just mentioned this because it's now the American news media is not paying attention, I've been talking about this on social media for like 3 years.
God, yes. Do not buy gold from UAE.
Because Dubai does not have any gold mines.
Exactly.
Dubai does not have any coffee plantations. Dubai does not have diamond mines. All of it comes from Sudan and Congo. And the same thing for Congo, where all of these countries, they're doing... And I don't even know what there has to be a term for it where you would call it exploitation marketing or exploitation tourism, where it's specifically targeting women and celebrities. Because I noticed, like for Dubai, they're using celebrities because there's an ad with Chris Hemsworth and his wife Elsa Pataky, where they're paragliding all over the dunes of Dubai and stuff, and like they're dressing all this kind of way. I'm like, women in Dubai from Dubai can't even dress that way. What are you doing?
No,
but it is insidious, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because it is something that it does play a lot into the politics, because it's about marketing to people to ignore the oppression of people so that you get a particular type of clientele, a particular type of tourists to go to these countries. And these tourists who are very much centered on money and appearances rather than actually being interested in the culture and the history.
Yeah. And I think that you and I are probably those people where, like, I'm not that excited to get on a jet ski and travel on an ocean. Do you know what I mean? So they do sort of, like you said, target a specific group, but it's a particular type of women that they target to bring in, so that there's also a clear division between the women, the community women, and those women. And again, then that just goes out into the globe, right? Like, it's like, it creates resentment.
Mm-hmm. It is. And in talking about that, I want to talk a bit about Mozhdah, because I think Mozhdah, her work specifically kind of ties into this, because when she was living in Afghanistan, she was a radio producer, a director for a show called Women's TV. She had her own show. She was a director and producer.
Shogofa Sediqi. Shogofa Sediqi was the news director. Yeah.
Shogofa Sediqi was the news director, and Mozhdah was the Oprah of Afghanistan.
Yeah, right. She was they named her the Oprah of Afghanistan. Look at this. Right? She had her own.
And so I want us to talk about the two of them, because they dealt with Afghanistan, media in Afghanistan in a very internal way. They were part of helping to shape media in Afghanistan and how women could be presented and shown on media in Afghanistan. And actually, when I'm thinking about it, all of the women that you have in your film do that, because Nelofer was an actress, so was Sahar, and Vida was the face of beauty pageants and beauty in Afghanistan. So now that I'm thinking about it, I think you did an excellent job picking who you wanted. But I want us to talk now a bit about Shogofa and Mozhdah for the work that they did in the media in Afghanistan.
So interestingly enough, they were both on Afghan television. They were both doing that work, but they had a very different role, right? Mm-hmm. Mozhdah was very much the Mozhdah show, and so she would talk about domestic violence and a lot of like family issues, educating families how to treat their women, their young children. And Shogofa was hard hitting. Shogofa was the news director of Women's Television Network. So she was very much reporting on the politics, the geopolitical issues, the Doha talks, the Taliban, the US, with a critical lens, being a woman. So they were both, and Shogofa was wearing a headscarf. Yeah. And Mozhdah was not wearing a headscarf. She had stiletto heels, had beautiful blonde hair. So they had a very
heels in every shot.
Every shot. And so they had a very different image, right? And of course, the Western gaze landed on Mozhdah because she was more of an image that they felt would be relatable to their women and all of that. So yeah, Mozhdah was then invited to the White House. Shogofa was not given those opportunities, like, unfortunately, right? Because she didn't fit into that frame that they wanted. So, but both of them took tremendous risk, and both of them were very smart, because people can look at Mozhdah and they think she looks like a Barbie doll, right? And also we can make her into our Barbie, right? But no, Mozhdah arrived at the White House. She enjoyed herself. She was grateful for the fact that attention was brought to Afghan women, but she used all her sort of social power, right, to keep on speaking about Afghan women instead of falling for sort of the goals of what they wanted her to become. She again was one of those women who did not want to become a pawn, a piece of chess to be played with. So I think, and the moment she did that is when they started pulling back support for her, right? To the point where they put her life in a tremendous amount of danger, right? Because she didn't play the game as they wanted, right? And with Shogofa, unfortunately, what happened to her was literally the news station was falling apart, like as the Taliban were coming inside Afghanistan. Like she was still reporting from her room, like from her little room space. So she kept on pushing, and thankfully, the United States was not interested in supporting and helping her out, but the Canadian government did. Yeah, the amazing senators in Canada, who mainly female, right, brought all of the journalists from Women's TV here. And that was a very interesting take that I saw, which is how fantastic that the US actually didn't even step in to help her. You know? So they had a very sort of a different experience. And Shogofa was the only woman who actually grew up all her life inside Afghanistan. Yeah. Like, all her life. While the rest of us, we had sort of left years ago. But I found it so fascinating that there's always an attempt to take the Afghan woman and use them as a pawn for sinister geopolitical agendas that the US has. And when our Afghan women, many of us don't, right? It's like, okay, well, then you are not of service to us.
Yeah, they abandoned them. They abandoned them. And I think that to me was so much more evident with Mozhdah, because they had her at the White House singing for Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and all of their celebrities at the White House there. And as she was singing, and those clips of her singing that song, which was a protest song about Afghani women and girls, it literally, in my head, it was thinking they set her up.
Yeah.
And then when there's the scene where you're talking with her about this, you guys are just sitting there in a crate and you're talking with her about this, and like you kind of almost in a weird way are reminiscing about the sounds of bombs dropping for Afghanistan, how that sounded, and whether it was normal and like and like as the normal aspect of your soundscape of memories of Afghanistan. I just kept thinking to myself, they set her up, they left her there. And then so I was so glad when you asked her about that, about what she felt, because, and the reason I said that is because there's a scene, I love again how you shot this, how you kind of had the women reinsert themselves into these memories. It's like they're going into their memories of these moments, these pivotal moments in their lives. And for Mozhdah, you have her watching the video of her singing at the White House, and she's in this ball gown and she's sitting there, she's looking so happy, and she's like, oh, I was so nervous there, and she was starstruck and all of this. And in my head I was thinking, I wonder what she thinks about Barack Obama now, like what he did with Afghanistan. You know, he dropped more bombs on Afghanistan than any US president. You know, and so in my head I was thinking, like, what kind of disconnect does that do to somebody mentally when you're so starstruck by seeing these people? Because US media has turned American presidents, and then him in particular, into these kind of deities, into these media in our minds. You're feeling starstruck and saying, oh my God, I'm here. But then the reality wants to step out, hits and say, wait, I have to go back to Afghanistan. And they give me no protection. They kind of set me up. they used me as a token. They used me as a prop, and then
Yeah.
discarded me when I had to still decided I want to still speak for Afghanistan women and not for not for the American media. Talk about that, because the way you have to sit on here, kind of like be with her in that particular moment. And I was glad you addressed it too, because I wanted to know, what does she think about him now? You know, and like having her have to go through that headspace, and it's interesting because she herself is a celebrity in Afghanistan, but she's starstruck in this movie America, and goes back and has to contend with her celebrity status as a woman, and then being seen as a traitor of Afghanistan, and then being betrayed by the US government. Like, it's so complex, and it's so, that's, I know, it's like, excuse my language, but it's like a mindfuck.
And that mindfuck, it wasn't planned. Like, I'll tell you that, Caroline, because when I talked to my producer, Terry Snellgrove, and Terry Snellgrove is a producer at the National Film Board of Canada, she was open to like us filming any of those scenes in any way. Like, she was like a full-on sister on my side. Originally, that projection of Mozhdah singing was going to be projected on a wall, like on a nice clean wall. And it was a complete accident where Bobby, who's our projection artist, accidentally, what happened was the projection fell on the ground. Okay. And when it fell on the ground, I suddenly saw cracks on the ground on top of that video. And I had always known in my heart that I felt that the US screwed over Mozhdah. Right? But I didn't want to say that to her, because I didn't want to like tell her what my feelings were, right? Because the film is all about the discovery that happens in a conversation, and her authentic version of that moment in time, right? And versus now. So I didn't want to like taint it, right? But I was like, I think I know they screwed her over. They did, because they have more money than anybody in the world to offer you whatever protections you need. If you abide by their rules, they will keep you safe, and you know, like, you'll be good, right? So when I saw the cracks, I was like, maybe this will open something in her heart if she sees the cracks in the projection. Do you know what I mean? Because cracks are so symbolic.
Yeah, like, they are.
If we see it over a perfect person's face, so we have Obama's face, and then there's like the ground cracked across his face, that gives you a visceral feeling, and it might open up something. And it did. Because she was watching it on the projection floor, and then we didn't have a conversation. She changed and she came for our sit-down interview. And I think because of whatever that moment was when she was looking on the ground, and the whole image didn't look as perfect as what her memory had. It had cracks in it. I think it got her thinking about the cracks in her experience, in her story. And so then when, you know, and then by weird chance, just the flow of conversation of just how it unfolded, we started with some like a superficial sort of idea of what it was, and then we really got to the heart, and she kind of just opened up. And I think that was the first time that I had heard that Facebook and Instagram had shadow banned her.
Yeah.
Like, I did not know about that. Like, the insidious sort of like, you know, hands at play that go in.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know?
And it shows how the government, whether like the US government is always talking about how other governments are oppressing other people, but it's like, you guys are right here oppressing everyone too. Like, you're spying on people. Now they're using AI to do it. They have all of these people at like Meta, Twitter, and all of these people operating in these platforms, Instagram, whatever, spying for them and shadow banning people, and, you know, like they're censoring the words that people say on TikTok and whatever. And it's just like the hypocrisy of it all, you know, because like they say, we are going to bring you to the West where you have freedom and you can be a true feminist and you can be a true woman, but really.
And then think about the insidious nature of like playing with the human psychology, right? Like pumping you up and getting you to 1 million+ followers, and you feel so good because you feel like, yes, I've got a platform now, like Mozhdah did. Like, I can speak about what I want, I can do my art, but I can also, you know, be a voice for my Afghan women. And then the moment you speak out against the West, the US, the companies that are in the US, well, guess what? Then they shadow ban you. And now you're like, oh my God, I can't speak to my people. to the people that have built my platform. And it's like, yeah, you can, but you have to say the words that we like.
Yeah.
It's so insidious. Like sometimes I think like, how much thinking is going into this?
A lot. A lot.
Right? Because it's like you've been pumped with dopamine, and like you take away the dopamine, like the person is going to want it.
Mm.
Oh, now, thankfully for Mozhdah, she went through the withdrawal and she stuck her ground, right? She refused to sort of give in. But I can understand why some other people change their dialogue then, right? And because they need that.
Yeah, because another part of that, we talk about Shogofa and Mozhdah in that way, but I want to also talk about Nelofer in that way, because Nelofer kind of did that with her work as an actress. Like we talked at the beginning about the film at Cannes, and like I want to go into that a bit, because for you as a filmmaker, and like you're showing your films at film festivals and different stuff and different things, and me being a critic and journalist, the work that I do going to film festivals, I see how all of that works behind the scenes, like the whole red carpet and everything. And I want to talk about her in particular because she had the experience of, we talked about her wearing the red dress, and like she talks about she wore the red dress for every photo call that she had to do, every interview she had, because she had a message. But I want to talk about how the film industry itself plays a part in this, and how film festivals themselves are a part of this machine, because again, like film festivals, they'll have films like her film Kandahar, or even a film like yours at these film festivals, and they'll be like, we want to use film festivals as a platform to show what films about the world and about the struggles of the world, about war and strife and oppression and occupation, all these things. But then when it comes time to actually supporting the creatives and actually having really true in-depth discussions about this, film festivals kind of leave things at the wayside, because it is at the end of the day part of the entertainment industry, and like they have their own agenda, which is we'll sell this story for a while until when we think it makes us look good. But once we realize that we're being criticized and critiqued and looked at a bit too closely, they pull back. So I want you to talk a bit about that from your perspective as a filmmaker and working in this industry.
So you know what? I'll be honest. Thankfully for myself, and it might have to do with the fact that this project has been with the National Film of Canada, that the whole marketing strategy has been very much from the beginning about change and impact. Yeah. So I think like that's why it got to people like you. That's how it came across, right? So like they've done their due diligence and making sure that it reaches community and film critics and journalists who would understand, right? So in that sense, I feel like it's been really good. And also with VIF, for instance, the Vancouver International Film Festival, which was great. Like they gave us a high school screening. Like we're just high school students.
Which is, I think, great, yeah.
And we're talking about young critical like minds, from the social justice classes, which was great, right? So, and then, we've had like, we had a screening in Montreal where like every single feminist organization in Montreal, which has many of them, were invited, and it was packed in that. So, but I think like if you're a young filmmaker and you're starting new, you can easily get lost in those things, right? In the glitz and the glam and the clinking of the wine glasses and the photographs, and you suddenly feel like, oh my God, I'm a star. But it's like, but your next film, you have to like go a little bit about, as I've been described when I was younger, the chip on your shoulder. That's how I was described one time when I was at a film festival, and I said, I'm not enjoying this conversation because I don't understand what we're all doing here. We're documentary filmmakers. Like this is all feeling so superficial. I was told that I have a chip on my shoulder. And I got thinking about that. And then I realized we have to know ourselves, at least try to know a little bit about when we are being bullshitted, when we are, as I say, groomed. When we are being groomed to serve the agenda of a government or an organization or a platform, because that's always happening. When with people of color from countries that are important for tech, for geopolitical reasons, for labor exploitation, anything like that, you know, if you go to those big festivals that are mostly funded through like, you know, corporations that are Western corporations, you are being groomed. Be careful. Be careful. Do you know what I mean? I really do, that's how I describe it. So it's important, and I wish that there were these conversations, because when we always refer to grooming, we assume it to like trafficked humans. But no, we're, as artists, we're also being targeted and groomed. And that's what Nelofer knew very well. She knew that at cons that there was a lot of forces around her that were trying to groom her into becoming a certain woman. The same for Mozhdah, right? The same for Vida, the same for she. They just understood though, and they stopped it. And I'm starting to understand that too, when I'm going and entering certain spaces where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to fall for it. You know, that's very important for filmmakers to understand, that as artists, all of us, even yourself as a film critic, you know, it's very easy to sort of like be wined and dined and treated with, just because they need your voice to amplify theirs. So you must feel that too at times.
I do. When I first got into this industry, I started doing this work in 2017. But I really went into it in full-time 2018. And I realized that pretty early on, especially because I'm Black and a Black female. And then it was hard to get into it at first. Just getting access was hard.
Right.
And I was working with when I started, I was working with a platform called Black Girls Nerd. I don't work with them anymore, but I got opportunities through them getting access to like particular studios, you know, because there's for studios, when they have Black films, they want Black coverage, you know, so we were getting like, I think, pretty consistent work then. And it was like a whole bunch of us, right? It wasn't just me, it was like a whole bunch of Black women working with this website. And so we got like access, you know, and we were getting like really good interviews, and then it dropped off. And then the protest for Black Lives Matter and for George Floyd happened.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you had film festivals were like, oh, we have inclusion initiatives now, you know, and inclusion in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then these inclusion initiatives, which were providing stipends for us. And like, that's why I was able to go to Sundance for the first time in 2020. Just before ish went COVID with the pandemic.
Literally.
Right? But I was able to go because I got money through the inclusion initiative, me and a bunch of other Black critics that I knew, and then I also did like a fundraiser on Twitter, because a GoFundMe, because the money that I got from the initiative was only enough for like the airfare. I didn't have enough money for like lodging and accommodation.
Oh my God.
And I was working part-time at a public school here, and I was also in school. I was in college. So like, and I was sick, but yeah, we were 199. I was invited to all of these events, and like, there were so many panel discussions and everything about inclusion and initiatives and all of these kind of stuff. And then 2021 happened, and like, we started to get less and less work, less and less invites, like less and less money in the inclusion initiatives. They would be like, oh, all of a sudden now there's like, if you got an inclusion initiative, the funding once, you're not going to be able to get it again. You know? And then that's when I started to pay a lot of attention to how this industry really works. I've always been paying attention even before I started in this work, but I really started to like, and I started to connect more dots and see the pattern evolving and everything. And I'm like, yeah, it is very much about whining and dining, and then wanting to use your voice, and like, even me with the small platform that I had at that time, they still needed my voice, because like, I still had like a good number of people like on social media following me, and the outlets that I wrote for, I was getting work with like bigger outlets, right? And then like, once that stopped, once 2021 happened, I realized, oh wait, I'm not getting commissions anymore. The pitches that I'm pitching aren't getting accepted. And the thing is like, my coverage from the very beginning has always been very analysis of the film industry, analysis of film, and critique. And when I say critique, I mean, I really do look at how culture is represented in film. I really look at how people of color, women, disabilities, all of these issues are represented in film. My thing has always been talking about cultural issues in film, right? And then, but all of a sudden, 2021 came, these same things that I've been writing about for several years before weren't getting the pitches weren't being accepted. I was like, okay. And then it was happening with more and more people. And it was like, does anyone notice the pattern that's evolving here? And people, and I had people telling me, oh, you're thinking too much. I'm like, I know I think too much because that's my brain. But I'm also like, is anyone not noticing the pattern? And now when you look at the landscape, everything that I said that was happening is happening and people are not paying attention. I'm like, I've been saying this for 7 years and you people were ignoring me. And this thing that I said happening is happening. Wow. You have like more critics of like who write, again, more critical analysis pieces of culture. They're not paid, they're not staffed in newsrooms. The cultural most of the cultural websites that wrote about culture and film aren't operating anymore. They're being shuttled or absorbed. Like you see, the most recent example would be Teen Vogue got absorbed by Vogue Media, which is owned by oh my gosh, Vogue is owned by, oh, I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, it's a company that Jeff Bezos is looking to go and buy, right? And I'm like, does anyone not see that how this is all political? Everyone's like, it's not. I'm like, it is all political. It's a form of censorship because they don't want cultural analysis of entertainment and media. And I'm like, if you have people who are critiquing the culture and the media as well as Hollywood, you're gonna encourage people to think more critically about film and the messages being shown in film. And if you remove the people who are pointing out these issues in the media, in film, in Hollywood, especially as Hollywood is a propaganda arm of the U.S. government, you're not going to have people being able to think critically about their media because you're not having people to help guide them to do that. I'm like, that's how you shift people's perspective generally, right? So it's like, so like when you have like people like Mozhdah and Shogofa and Nelofer who are not in Afghani spaces talking about culture and Afghani politics from a female lens, if you move them, if you remove these women, it's gonna happen. And the same thing is happening in America now. And I'm like, and here in Canada, it's the same. There's probably like 5 women in Canada that I'm aware of that do film culture analysis like me. There's me, there's another person named Carolyn, there's another woman named Sarah Tai. There's a couple other women of color, Black women that do this work. And so like in Canada, like I don't even really pitch. I stopped pitching to Canadian outlets like a few years ago because I wasn't getting pitches accepted. And I'm like, so that's why I have my YouTube channel and my podcast. I have to create my platform because I'm like, no one is accepting my pitches. So I'm going to do the work myself on my platform. It's not paid, but at least I'm trying to do my part to do it because I saw the writing on the wall years ago. So I was like,
you did it on your own terms. Now that, as you're saying this, I'm remembering you're actually right, because there was a time in like 2018, 19, 20, when there was a lot of alt media outlets that were more left and democratic in a sense and critical. And then they all got bought out by big companies. And I remember everybody getting excited, but you know what? They've been silent since then. Like people buy companies and then they just shut them off, right? But if you notice that the right alt media, how much it's grown and how much even the mainstream media amplifies their voices. Like they do it in this, like, again, a very sinister way where they criticize it. But even if you're criticizing it, you're still giving it a platform and you're amplifying it, right? But we don't hear, for instance, of the alt feminist media, the speakers, the cultural critics like you and that. They don't give that a voice. And people sometimes say, oh, well, no, they're criticizing the alt-right. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're giving them a platform.
Exactly.
Like, there's an old saying, like, no attention or whatever is bad. As long as you're getting it, you're getting the space, right? So the Taliban, if I come back to it, are given a lot of space and attention, the word itself. We rarely hear Afghan women nowadays, right? It's always, so it's like, there is power when you mention names and, you give people a space, or even if in whatever way you criticize them or not, But yeah, I feel for you. I hope it changes. I hope somehow it changes because, the fact of the matter is that, as you said, Hollywood news media is a huge propaganda arm of the United States and also of Europe and all of that, But those women that comply and they don't realize that are in real danger, because if you're Caroline, if you as a woman of color, for instance, are not getting the space and the attention that you deserve, that you need, because you are approaching it with a critical lens, and an intelligent lens, right? Then I would say, okay, people can say it's Afghan women, but then I can say, well, it's not just me. See, I spoke to Caroline. She's not Afghan. She's a woman of color from a similar industry, but her critical thinking is being challenged and being silenced. And then I would say, okay, you can wait, but if you're a white woman that then also is critical of your government, that you'll get silenced next. It's going to happen. It's not like the domino's not going to come to you. It will. It's already happening to our LGBTQ plus community, because that beautiful community is part of our community. When we're silenced, they're silenced. But it amazes me that leftist white people in America or whatever think it's never going to come for them.
And you know why? And you know why that is? Because a lot of them don't even understand their own history. Because a lot of white people don't understand that even within whiteness, there's still classism. There's a particular type of white. There's a particular type of whiteness that that has to be ascribed to. Like, for instance, I'll use we mentioned ICE, like the ICE kidnappings. People were like saying, oh, they'll only go for the immigrants, the illegal people. I'm like, from the beginning, I'm like, do you people not know your own history? During World War II, the US government went and locked up Japanese citizens, Japanese American citizens who had been living in the US and were born in the US for decades, put them in internment camps and shipped them across to the West Coast and up here in Canada, because we had internment camps for Japanese Americans and Japanese Canadians all across the West Coast in British Columbia, Vancouver, and all that, and a lot in Alberta. And people are saying, oh, that's not going to happen to think. I'm like, what part of American history has ever led you to believe that the US government as an institution cares about the rights of its own citizens?
Exactly.
Do people not remember that in the early 1940s that they were calling Irish people who were white, white with black, with right here, black Irish? And the reason we're calling them black Irish is because they were looked at as less than European whites. And even when you got European whites, there's classism in the European whites, because you had the Polish, you had the Polish, the Russians, the Germans, the French, and the Brits. And like, people always forget, during the Holocaust in Europe, people always talk about just the Jews. I'm like, no. Yes, the Nazis went after Jews, but they went after white people from ethnic minorities like the Polish.
And let's not forget the simple fact that white women were being burned and called witches because they disagreed, or they showed signs of not being agreeable or presenting themselves in a way. And those are white women. So at the end of it, there's a DNA that the other, like, it's like, understand. I know for a full fact, I hope it doesn't happen, because the thing with, like, I always say, I hope that women in other parts of the world do not live what the Afghan women did, because at this moment, we do need our sisters outside of Afghanistan to have strength and to have freedom and to have access to power and be able to bring about positive change, because we need them to help us, right? Like, it's kind of like, I mentioned once, it's like, the airplane scenario, which is put your oxygen mask on before you whatever, save the child next to you. And I say to all the women and girls outside of Afghanistan, particularly in the United States, please put that oxygen mask on. Because if you lose your powers and your ability to fight for yourself, how are you going to fight for me? And I have nobody inside my country right now. So I really need you. So can you please stand up? Can you please fight for your reproductive rights and your just a lot of other rights, so that get strong?
But you see, the thing is that for and again, me, and this is something that I always tell people and I always speak about, because I'm from the Caribbean, I'm from Barbados, so I grew up watching America from the outside. I grew up watching American media. Same thing with Canada. I grew up watching Canadian media from the outside. Then once I came here, I'm like, oh wait, I have an extremely unique perspective, because I tell people, Americans don't understand how America is propagandized to the world. America tells the world, oh, it's the land of milk and honey. You can come here, be anything you want to be. You can be a president if you want to be, forgetting that only one person can be president at one time. But then they say, come here, do all of these things. There's that. But then they also go to other people's countries, bomb them, undermine governments, steal resources, then say, oh, wait, you are an immigrant here. How dare you come here and try to take our, and the immigrants aren't even taking anything. The immigrants are contributing to America as they're also giving to their families back home where they come from, and it's like, you people sell yourself as this haven on the mountain. But yeah, when people come to try and see that and live in this reality, you're saying you don't want them. And then you got white women again, because we're talking specifically about white women, and there are women of color within America that do this too, like Black women and Asian women, women of other ethnic
minorities. There are Afghan women too who do, yes.
Who buy fully into the idea, but for white women in particular, like they don't even see how they're being sabotaged and set up right now. And like you got Erica Kirko, they're literally this morning before we began our thing. I saw her, she's doing these interviews. She's college educated, has a business, doing all of these things, and is telling white American women, you need to stay home and serve your husband. I'm like, do you people not see the problem with this?
She's telling them not to go to cities like New York, cities like Los Angeles, cities like San Francisco, cities like Seattle, because those cities are fight for human rights a bit more. So she's telling them, stay put in your Utah, Georgia, Arkansas homes. Yeah, don't chase the city dreams.
While she's getting flown about in private jets to go and say these things to them. And then, but the thing is like, and the thing is, again, from the outside, like, American people are not they don't think very globally, and they're very myopic. And Canadians to an extent are the same way. Canadians are very myopic. Like we see it in our politics and how people vote here. Here in Ontario, people barely voted the last election. Now we got Doug Ford here for a third term. How here we can have in Ontario. And a lot of it happened is because a lot of Canadians, they're very apathetic when it comes to politics. And me from the Caribbean, where politics is such a big part of our culture, that blows my mind. And I'm like, do we people not see what happened in the US? How are we not learning from their mistake?
Yeah.
Right. But the problem is that America has so much power, so much influence, that we have to care so much about what they do and what they say and what they think, you know? And it burns me that we have to do this, because people be like, why are you guys talking so much America? I'm like, because America has so much power, so much influence in what we do and what we say. Most of the work I do, when I was getting a lot of work as a writer, was coming from American outlets, because I wasn't getting Canadian outlets to commission my work. I wrote for a couple of Korean outlets because I cover a lot of Asian media stuff, but even that has kind of dried up. And it's like, and there's two outlets that I still do work for. One is Joy Sauce, which is Asian diaspora centered art media platform, and that's centered out of America. The other website that I write for, K Crush, again, another Asian diaspora media center platform, is operated out of the US, but the person that runs it is a Black woman, right? And that's literally, apart from my own platform, are the only two platforms that I get to do any work for, period. For the last 3 years, that's how it's been.
But you know what? I'm hopeful, Caroline. I have hope in the smaller American population that's getting active and rising up. I'm really happy because like I see a lot of people that normally would not get angry, literally getting really angry, blatantly getting angry at ICE, standing up, like people that would normally walk down the street and not even say hi to each other. I'm seeing like shifts happen because I'm following all the actions of ICE and things. Yeah, and I'm also sensing just like an overall fed upness with the materialistic, capitalistic, as you said, imperialist sort of regime that it is. People are getting tired of it. People are not interested in buying, supporting companies that sell certain things. If they're supporting, Israel, for instance, or whatever, people like the 20 to 30-year-olds, they're like taking a stand. So I feel like in the film, we had Shogofa say something very hopeful, right? Which she genuinely believes. And I think it's probably because she's lived in Afghanistan. She's seen her mom and her known of her grandmother's story and stuff. So she knows, and Afghanistan is a good country as a reminder of that for people, is that tyrants do not last.
They don't.
That society, it's almost like it's like a correction in a sense, because we are as a society becoming less interested in materialistic things. Who wants a Tesla right now? Like, ew,
they're ugly.
Like police. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like people are ashamed, like, because they should be.
They should be ashamed. There's like three of them there's like three of them I see in Toronto, and every time I see them I say that is a
but people know it. Like people know it. Do you know what I mean? So, and even just the over display of wealth, all that stuff, like people are getting sick of it. People are just like, you know what? That just is not necessary.
Yeah.
We don't need to. And people are mocking the 1%. You know, we have like people like Billie Eilish, like, you know, asking, the tech people, like, why do you want to be a billionaire or trillionaire? Like, why? Like, why? Like, why? Aren't you happy just being a millionaire? Like, so I'm really seeing a shift, and I get it that it's going to be tough. It will probably be a couple of years, but I genuinely feel that America is going to collapse.
It's every empire falls eventually.
It does, and especially because people within it are sick of like just the blatant breakdown of fundamental human right rules that people were acceptable. And now you're looking at these people and you're like, you're just not a good human, period.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, being a good human being, being a person that cares about community and the world and another human is sort of becoming more likable and more important than a few years ago. So I feel like we're in this correction model. And I feel like Afghanistan is part of that correction model in educating. So that's the beautiful thing in the film, which is when Sahar said that the world can learn from Afghan women.
Yes.
You know, I was very surprised, but I was like, oh yeah, you all can learn from us. Did you see that there were men in suits, your politician men, shaking hand with fundamentalists and saying, go ahead and do whatever you want to the women in Afghanistan? So careful, double check. You know, so in that sense, I'm hopeful. I get it. We have a bit of a tough ride, but I feel like we're going to get to a better place in a couple of years.
No, I agree with you, and I believe it. Like, every empire has to fall. It's like a snake eating its tail. And yeah. I'm cynical when it comes to politics and things like that, but I'm also a very optimistic person because I believe that we as human beings, like, that the people who want better and who believe it better outnumber the people who don't. Yeah. And it is hard to be the only person sometimes speaking loud. But I believe that speaking loud is important, and speaking truth to power is important. And that's why I'll continue to use my platform to uplift films like yours and women like Sahar and Mozhdah and Shogofa and Vida and Nelofer, because like there are women out there making the change and doing the change and being the change, you know. Like, yeah. I love at the end where Shogofa was, and where Shogofa had this moment of you're just like connecting to each other physically, but I think also emotionally. You were like, Afghanistan will be okay. Afghanistan will be okay, and you want to be able to walk back on your streets in Afghanistan, you know. Yeah. And I will begin wrapping up, but I kind of want to end there because there is hope that I do not believe in being fatalistic at all. I don't believe, because even when I think about things like climate change and like the world is like tired and she's crying out and all of these things, I'm like, there is a way to correct it. We just have to do the course correction soon, and quickly, you know. And before, like, I don't believe in being fatalistic. I have to keep saying that there has to be hope and there has to be a change. And so I want us to kind of end there, like talking about that moment that you had with Shogofa in the film, you know, and like where you and her just connecting and holding hands and you're saying it's gonna be okay, you know, because she survived, right? You survived. All of these women that you had survived this huge crushing reality, and you survived. You came out of it on the other side, and I believe that there will be a change. There has to be.
Yeah. With Shogofa, honestly, you know, as I say in the film, genuinely the reason why I fell in love with 100%, you know, falling in love with my identity. Every woman served a different purpose, but it really was Shogofa that made me really fall in love. And she's so different from me, right? She wears a headscarf. She's much quieter. She doesn't sort of, you know, dress the way I do, but she represented to me the ultimate Afghan woman, because she grew up inside Afghanistan. She had never left the country. So she really opened my eyes to my country. Do you know what I mean? From a perspective that is so authentic, rooted into what my country's ideals are in terms of how you navigate life and how. And what I understood was how much she fought to get to where she was as the head of the news director. I know that's not easy to become that position. So I honestly, the original interview, I expected to end on a very sorrow note. I really did. And I thought that, you know, because I thought that, you know, she's going to probably be very upset and say that she's very angry and she's not, you know. And she surprised me with her quietness, with her sort of like, she really took her time to answer questions, like really like thinking from her heart, right? And then just out of nowhere, she became a beacon of hope. And it's because when she came to Canada, I think a year after that, she gave birth to her daughter. Right? And she just refused to accept the idea that her daughter would not be able to see Afghanistan as a more free and a kinder place for women and girls, and a place where people can thrive. She just refused that. And when she told me that that is what her hope and goal is, and that she expects to see it, honestly, it melted my heart, because I was just like, wow, like in my head, like the power when you love someone and you love something as she loves Afghanistan, she's not going to give up on it. And it's so much easier for me to give up on it, or even, our, Vida and, Mozhdah, because we left it such a long time ago. Right? But Shogofa refuses to give up on it. And I was like, if this woman is not giving up on it, then I'm not going to give up on it, because she knows better than me. Like, she's spent every inch of her life in that land.
Yeah.
So she knows. And it feels good ending on that note, because it's more hopeful to have a fight then. It's more hopeful to like speak up and out, because if she had not said that, I probably wouldn't have done as many interviews. I probably wouldn't, because if it feels hopeless, what's the point then, right?
So was she one of the first interviews you did then?
Nope, she was the last.
She was the very last one then?
Yeah, she was actually, her interview was 6 months after everybody else's.
Oh, really?
Which I'm so happy, because there was, the idea of the film was not that we would end with her. Or that, like, that's something in documentary we sort out in editing, and I had a really good editor, Jessica Diamond, but it just turned out that she was the last interview. 6 months had surpassed in between. She had given birth to her baby, so her perspective had shifted. Had we done the interview with her first, she would not have given birth to her child. I don't know if then she would be as determined and to be hopeful, right? I feel like the film would have been a different film.
Yeah, I think it would have been, especially on what she said, because she has that new perspective and that outlook is different, right? So yeah, I think it would have been a very different film, especially because, and I think it was so important that you had that at the end, because so much of the film is so emotionally heavy, right? Like there's moments where Vida becomes so visibly emotionally upset because she's thinking about what was taken from her. She was like, I remember what it was like walking on these red carpets. Same thing with Nelofer. And interestingly enough, the two of them walking on red carpets were in two completely different contexts. But like so much of the interview was emotionally heavy, even for Shogofa, like when you guys were talking about when she had to go and vote, like what that was like for her emotionally.
Yeah.
Something she says where she was like, I was afraid, but I couldn't talk about my fear because then my family would say like, would want me to stop working, but even amidst that, even after she admits that, she's like still saying, I still want to go back, because like, she's like, I can't let the fear rule me. I have to like, I have the fear, I acknowledge the fear, but I'm not going to let that rule me. And so I think it's important that the film ends that way, because it's showing all of these different perspectives that all of these women from Afghanistan have, and these different, because they're all in media but from different aspects of media, and like they're different ages and have different experiences and left Afghanistan at different times, including yourself. And so like having her be kind of like the person, I can imagine like if you had like a roundtable discussion with all of them, like what that would have been like, and like she would be the one to remind everyone like this is still our home. We can't let them change what home means for us, right?
Yes,
exactly. Film there was like really important.
What you just said right now, when you said this is our home and they can't change what home means for us, like that's beautiful, Caroline.
No, because that's just like, that's something that I just feel about and feel really intensely about as a Caribbean person, and just like we, I think for people, for us, like especially as women and women of color, and like people who are immigrants in particular, like we amidst everything, we can't let, it's so important what home means for us. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently as I grow older, like what is home and what does home mean? And
Yeah.
home, I think this is from a movie where the person was like, home isn't more than a feeling, is like it's a place, but it's also like this abstract thing. And like I think for people from places where like so much strife has gone, but you still have this intense longing to return, you can't let the idea of home change, because without home, what do you have to go back to? What's your foundation? What is what is it if you change the foundation of a house? Like the house is no longer the same house, right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's kind of where my brain is at.
Yeah, and navigating life as a stranger is difficult.
It is very strange. I mean, we live in very strange times.
Yeah.
We live in very, very strange times. So I think it's important that we have at least one constant thing, and say what is home. Like home is our constant, because so much is happening. This world is changing so rapidly, and like there's so many things happening. You can't keep up with with it all. It's overwhelming. And so like I love that the film ends there, this moment of peace and togetherness and stuff, because like so you guys talk about so many difficult concepts and experiences. So but thank you so much for taking the time for talking with me, Brishka. Like this was really great conversations. I love having these kind of conversations with my guests.
Yeah, it's great. Caroline, thank you for having me and for speaking about In the Room. And I'm going to follow you and get to know you and your work more. It's going to be good.
No, for sure. You will see that I'm always posting.
Good. I'm not on Twitter, but I am on Instagram. So I'll stay connected with you on Instagram.
No, for sure. Thank you so much. And for the ladies, if you get to watch this, thank you so much for being in the film and for sharing your experiences with the world.
I will share it with them. All right. Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Have a good day.